As we have seen, you can use the processes involved in solving equations to rearrange formula. And I'm going to show you here how the process of solving the equation on the left can be used to rearrange the formula on the right to make x the subject. So the first step will be, or can be, to multiply by 3 on each side. And the whole reason is the opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So we are actually trying to get rid of that denominator by multiplying by 3 on each side. So 3 divided by 3 will be 1, so that's gone. So what we shall end up with is 15 is equal to x. Okay, and that's a solution for that equation. And we can apply the same process to work out the equations on the right. So multiply by 3. And again, 3 divided by 3 is 1. So what we shall end up with here is 3h is equals to x. Okay. All right. Example 2. Solve for x. And the first step, just like in example 1, is to multiply by 3 on each side. Now, again, 3 divided by 3 is 1, so we are left with 15 is equals to 2x. The opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2, so you divide by 2 on each side. So we shall end up with 15 over 2 is equal to, now 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we are left with x. And that will be our solution. On the right hand side, we'll apply the same process, multiplied by 3 on each side. So what we shall be left with is, by the 3 by 3, that's 1. So you're left with 3h is equals to 2x. And then the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. So we divide by 2 on each side. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we are left with 3h over 2 is equals to x. Example 3, solve for x. Now, you can apply a trick here, just similar to what we've done. Obviously, we can notice here that x is multiplied by 5 over 7. Now, the opposite of multiplying by 5 over 7 is dividing by 5 over 7. So we can go ahead and divide by 5 over 7 on each side. So divide by 5 over 7 on the left and divide by 5 over 7 on the right. So 5 over 7 divided by 5 over 7 will be equal to 1. So what we shall be left with is this. X will be equal to 2 over 3 divided by 5 over 7, which can be written as 2 over 3 multiplied by 7 over 5. And you can simplify this to 14 over 15. So basically, x is equal to 14 over 15. We can apply the same process to the right. So again, by inspection, you can see that x is multiplied by b over t. So what we want to do is to perform the inverse operation, which is the opposite of multiplying by b over t. So we can divide by b over t on the left and divide by b over t on the right. So what we shall be left with is b over t divided by b over t will be equal to 1, because you're dividing by itself. So what you're left with is x will be equal to u over v divided by b over t, which is the same as u over v multiplied by t over b. And this is equal to ut over vb. So x will be equal to that, okay, in simplified form. Okay, next example, rearrange the formula to make x the subject. So the first step is that we want to have x on one side, but there's something that has been added to 2/3 of x. And we need to get rid of this positive n. And the opposite of adding n is subtracting n. So that will be our first step, subtracting n from each side. And what you'll end up with is d minus n is equals to 2 over 3x. And then the next step can be, by inspection, you can notice that x is multiplied by 2 over 3. So the opposite of multiplying by 2 over 3 is divided by 2 over 3. So you divide by 2 over 3 on each side, which means, and by the way, 2 over 3 divided by 2 over 3 is 1. So what we shall end up with is this. On the left, that will be d minus n divided by 2 over 3 is equal to x. Or you can write this as d minus n multiplied by 3 over 2 is equals to x. And that can be just rearranged to be written in this form, 3 over 2 d minus n is equals to x. And that's fine. You can leave it in that form. Okay. Example on your right. So k is equals to u minus a third x. So the first step can be, now you can see that x is negative, and I mentioned in the previous videos that if x is negative, no matter its whatever its coefficient is, if it's negative, we need to make it positive. We need to handle it when it's positive. So what we are going to do is to add a third x on each side. Okay. Now, negative a third x plus a third x, that will be 0. So what we shall end up with is k plus a third x is equal to u. And you can see that the second equation is much better. We don't have negatives, which is better. And then what we can do is, by inspection, you can see that we have a positive k on the left. But we want x to be by itself. So the next step will be subtracting k from each side. K minus k will be 0. So you have a third x will be u minus k. And then by inspection, again, you can see that u is multiplied by a third. The opposite of multiplying by a third is dividing by a third. So we divide by a third on each side. So a third divided by a third will be equal to 1. So x will be equal to u minus k divided by a third, which is same as u minus k, u minus k. And that will be your final solution. Okay, next example, rearrange the formula to make x the subject. So again, the first step will be to, by inspection, you can see that h is added on each side. So the first step that we want to do is to subtract h on each side. So because we want to be left by x, with x only. So subtract h here, subtract h there. So what you'll end up with is p minus h is equal to t over z x. Because h minus h is equals to 0. And then by inspection, you can see that x is multiplied by t over z. So what you're going to do next is to divide by t over z. So you divide by t over z on the right, divide by t over z on the left. So t over z divided by t over z, that will be equal to 1. So p minus h divided by t over z is equals to x. And This can be written as P minus H multiplied by Z over T is equals to X. Or we can write this as bring the Z over T in front. So Z over T into P minus H is equals to X. And that will be our final solution. Okay. We can apply the same process to B. So the first step will be, because we have negative X, we can start by adding on each side negative M over NX, so that we can end up with a positive X term, right? Because this is a negative term, we need a positive term. We can easily handle it. So anyway, so we add M over N X on each side. And what we shall end up with is this will be equal to 0. It's just like negative 2 plus 2. You have 0. So we shall end up with V plus M over NX is equal to K. And then what you can do next is, obviously by inspection, you can see that V is added to this equation. So subtract V from each side. And what we shall end up with is V minus V, that will be 0. So M over NX is equals to K minus V. And then again by inspection, you can see that M over N is multiplied by X. The opposite of multiplying by M over N is dividing by M over N. So divide by M over N. So this divided by that will be equal to 1. So X will be equal to K minus V divided by M over N. And this can be written as K minus V multiplied by N over M. Or we can bring N over M in front. And we have a better equation. Okay? And that will be the final solution. Example 5, rearrange the formula to make X the subject. So again, the first step here is by inspection, you can see that pi r squared is multiplied by X. So what you are going to do is to perform an inverse operation. And the inverse of, or the opposite of multiplying by pi r squared is dividing by pi r squared. So we divide by pi r squared. What we shall end up with is, by the way, pi r squared divided by pi r squared will be equal to 1. So what we shall end up with is V over pi r squared is equals to X. And that will be a final solution. Example 5b, the easiest way is you can start by getting rid of the fraction, the denominator, which is 2. And that will be multiplying the left and the right by 2. So a half of 2 is 1. So we are left with 1 on the right, which means our resulting equation will be 2k is equals to v squared x. The opposite of multiplying by v squared, it's dividing by v squared. So we divide by v squared on each side. Divide by v squared here. Divide by v squared there. So what you shall end up with is, and by the way, v squared divided by v squared, that will be equal to 1. So what we shall end up with is 2k over v squared is equals to x. And that will be our final solution.